Why is no one interested in living in Canada anymore? When people are asked where they would like to migrate, Canada almost always tops the list. This country is renowned for its safety, stability, prosperity, top-notch services, strong economy, and efficient government, offering a perfect balance between financial success and quality of life. However, according to Canadians, this perception isn't the reality. Surveys show that 2/3 of Canadians believe nothing in the country is in its rightful place and are deeply pessimistic about their economic situation and quality of life. But what's really going on in Canada? Why are Canadians so dissatisfied with their lives? And is everything as bad as they say? In this video, we're going to show you the dark side of Canada. Before we delve into the events happening in Canada, let's take a closer look at how people feel about the country. Although there's a stereotypical image of Canada being a land of happy, content people, the reality is quite the opposite. Surveys indicate that over half of Canadians are unhappy and angry with how their country is being managed. And 2/3 of the population believe that Canada is in a state of disarray, worried about the economy and their ability to meet daily needs. Other surveys and data also confirm this depression, anger, and pessimism among Canadians. Most Canadians are dissatisfied with their country and feel that their lives were better in the past. They believe that the provision of services in Canada has significantly deteriorated, and every survey or statistic you examine paints the same bleak picture, which is hardly encouraging. Compared to people in most developed countries, Canadians express more concern and pessimism about their economy and personal quality of life. Public sentiment toward Canada is currently at its lowest in recent years, and although Canada still has a high immigration rate, it seems that the country's appeal among immigrants is also declining. Recent research suggests a growing trend of immigrants voluntarily leaving Canada due to dissatisfaction with the standard of living and economic prospects. But what factors in Canada are causing this sentiment and encouraging people to leave the country? While Canada is famous for being an excellent and flawless country, a deeper look reveals that this perfect image starts to fade. You've probably heard that many countries around the world are going through a housing crisis. But wherever you are, the housing situation is probably not as bad as in Canada, which is one of the most expensive countries for housing. Over the past 10 years, the value of an average home in Canada has more than doubled, and rental prices have risen at a similar rate, making renting a property extremely difficult and buying a home almost impossible. In Toronto, middle-income residents spend 120% of their income on rent, meaning they have to add some money on top of their income just to pay rent. And if someone wants to buy a property in Vancouver, they need an income of at least $250,000 just to qualify for a mortgage. In other words, buying property in Canada is now nearly impossible for people with extremely high incomes, and even they must struggle to pay off their mortgages. This is why Canada has the highest household debt among G7 countries and the largest housing bubble in the country's history. But why has housing become so unaffordable in Canada? There's a high demand for housing in this country because Canada accepts 500,000 immigrants annually, so it needs more homes for this rapidly growing population. But the main problem isn't the population increase. The main issue is that Canada has utterly failed to build enough homes to accommodate these new residents. In Canada, as in all other countries, housing policies are controlled by municipal governments, and they're unwilling to build more homes because doing so would lower the prices of existing properties. Fewer homes mean that the prices of existing homes continue to rise, which is great for homeowners who are potential voters. Therefore, local politicians, to avoid upsetting current voters and to keep them happy, ignore the housing shortage, even if it makes housing unaffordable for others. With a constantly growing population and the fact that real estate has become a safe and popular investment option for wealthy foreigners, particularly Asians looking for a secure place for their money, housing seems increasingly out of reach. However, the skyrocketing cost of living in Canada is not limited to housing. Canadians spend surprisingly more than almost anyone else in the world on common expenses, like groceries, banking fees, mobile phone costs, or air travel. Fuel costs in Canada are much higher than in the United States. and healthcare costs are much more expensive than in Europe. The high cost of living in Canada is not accidental, but is a direct result of the fact that Canada is more dominated by monopolies than any other country. In other words, most industries in Canada are controlled by one or a few giant companies. And this didn't happen by chance. It's the result of a suspicious strategy adopted by many Canadian governments over time. This strategy stems from Canada's long-term fear that its domestic companies would be overwhelmed by the larger and more aggressive competition from U.S. companies. Of course, this fear isn't entirely baseless. Any country living next to the world's largest and most competitive economy has the right to be concerned. But this fear has made Canada overly conservative, seeing the only way to prevent the influence of American companies as allowing Canadian companies to grow and become as big as possible. As a result, while governments in most countries try to prevent companies from becoming too large, Canadian governments generally try to help them grow even bigger. That's why Canada's economy consists of a handful of large companies without any foreign competition. The problem is that monopolies benefit no one except the companies themselves. As many studies show, since there's no competition in Canada, companies tend to raise prices simply because they can, and consumers end up paying more for lower quality services. As a result, companies don't need to compete with international companies to make a profit. They can easily make profits within their own country. That's why there isn't a single Canadian company with global reputation and success. This is just one of the many issues facing Canada. Another problem is that, although Canada appears to be a very wealthy country, unlike many developed economies, its wealth is primarily based on commodity exports like oil, gold, and other natural resources, and a portion of its real estate market, which is highly inflated. This indicates that beyond these sectors, there are limited high-paying job opportunities, especially the kind of jobs that university-educated, middle-class individuals typically seek. While Canada technically has a labor shortage, the demand is mostly for low-wage, low-skill jobs, making life difficult even for those with middle incomes. Finally, although Canada is known for having high-quality public services and broad access to them, especially compared to the U.S., the reality is that this is no longer the case, or at least it was only true in the past. The best example is healthcare. Today, only 37% of Canadians believe that they would receive adequate medical care in the event of a sudden emergency, while 70% of Americans believe they would receive this help. And Canadians are right. They are increasingly dying in emergency rooms and while waiting for admission due to a severe shortage of medical staff in Canadian hospitals. This is despite the fact that Canada spends more on healthcare than any other European country. And yet almost all European countries surpass Canada in measures such as wait times and the number of hospital beds. Overall, the Canadian healthcare system, once a source of pride for the country, is now ranked as one of the worst among OECD countries. And this is one of the most common reasons why Canadians think their politicians have completely failed in managing the country. The bottom line is that the ideal image of Canada as a modern utopia is rapidly collapsing upon closer inspection. The decline in life satisfaction among Canadians over the past decade, given the worsening housing crisis, unbearable living costs, monopolized economy, and deteriorating public services, is hardly surprising. Unfortunately, if Canada doesn't start addressing these issues immediately, the once idealized image of the country will become increasingly distant from reality. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. We're Exodopia. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.